Hello and welcome to this week's review on Dragon Ball Daima. This week I'm reviewing the episode titled Third Eye, and we kick off this review as we always do with these reviews by talking about the positives and the headline positives. All the things I loved about this particular episode, which I'll discuss in greater detail in just a moment. I loved the backstory of the Third Eye. I enjoyed the action sequence we got pretty much through the entirety of this episode, and I think this episode was structured really well given ultimately what it was about. Now, I think we might as well just rip the band-aid off and just talk about the titular Third Eye and everything that we learnt about it in this episode, and the appearance of a certain character from Z, who I'm sure many people are happy to end up seeing. Now, I will admit that I did call this a few weeks back. I'm not the only one to have called it. In fact, you yourself, dear listener, might well have guessed this was going to be the case as well. And if you did, then by all means let me know in the comment section down below. But just let me hold this for a moment, because this is the third time that a theory of mine, particularly something to do with anime stuff and manga stuff, has actually held true, and I feel a bit good about that. So, if you all want to call me a genius, then by all means. But anyway, obviously it turned out that Hybis had the Third Eye after all. I mean, jokes aside, it really wasn't that hard to figure out, and to be honest with you, I think even a kid could have seen this one coming, because beyond anything else, this is the only eye that we have seen in this entire thing that wasn't belonging to a member of the cast or extended cast. So, I will just say is that beyond anything else, I get serious for a moment, I am happy that ultimately a whole sequence of events in this episode didn't just boil down to Goma seeing it on the TV screen and going, Degasu, go get me that thing! And that was it. Thankfully, this week we did get the backstory for it, and it is something that I am glad about. This is an ancient device passed down from Demon King to Demon King, or at least until Dabura hired a cockroach to steal it from his dad, and only for said cockroach to get smashed in the head by a giant troll and it to get lost. Yeah, that whole series of events just feels really strange and surreal in a regard, and if it weren't for that, this is Dragon Ball, then I'm kind of used to that kind of stuff happening in here. It would feel mighty strange, but hey, I liked it. I liked the whole sequence of events, the chase sequence we got with this little cockroach guy getting chased around the demon realm before eventually meeting a very untimely and squishy end at the hands of that giant troll monster. I mean, yeah, it's a bit of a downer, but hey, I mean, given everything else that's happened in that whole sequence of events and the knock-on consequences of it, it's just the way that these things go. But let's be honest, there is a certain degree of innuendo here, and I don't mean in the look at those melons kind of way. I mean in the sense of that this whole series of events, it does hint to the fact that Dabura more than likely took the opportunity that the loss of the Third Eye presented to kill his father and to secure his rule, which, look, for however long or short that might well have been, I think that is definitely the case. I don't recall if earlier in this series it actually was outright stated, or even in Z if it was outright stated that Dabura killed his father, but at least at the moment, in the here and now, it does heavily hint to the fact that he did. And look, I know this is going to sound strange given that I've prayed so much about this series of being kind of light and bright and fluffy, that I really did like the tone of all of this. I love the intrigue at court that we get with this series of events. It is done in a very matter-of-fact kind of way. There is no wild flair to it. There is no big, dumb anime battle with Dabura and his father getting some big, elongated fight with laser beams and hidden power levels and magic and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a time and a place for that, but for something like this, perfectly fine to just do it in a very matter-of-fact, almost medieval, feudal, intrigue at court kind of way, like I said. And I will say is that this does work for two reasons. One of the reasons is the fact that for this series this far, this Dragon Ball Daima series, I haven't had anything that quite is as dark as this, so it sticks out and has a lot more of a chance to look unique and have a lot of greater sense of drama behind it, because we're not reveling in this kind of misery and flagellating darkness as other series will probably have done to death by this point. And it's also the simple fact that it is just very in keeping with the tone of the rest of the episode. Oh, don't get me wrong, this is not a dark episode. This isn't the moment where it goes from happy fun adventure time to now it's time for the dark time. No, we don't have anything like that, but it's within that same neighbourhood. This week our cast of characters are in a more of a desperate situation for the entirety of this episode, so it at least keeps within that kind of neighbourhood, and this tension that we have throughout this episode is present with how much our characters struggle with the fight, and I know that's something that some people might find issues with, but we'll discuss the fight later on in the review. But I think it works. The tension that we have here, the dark colouring, it makes it feel as though there's a lot more of a greater weight to the current proceedings, that we are really into a whole new world in this story. And this whole sequence of events, all this stuff with Dabura trying to get on over his father, it has a similar kind of tone to me that feels much like the first act of Super Dragon Ball, Super Broly, or whatever the title of the movie was called, which I liked. I mean, not to get into a review on that, but I feel around the time that Goku and his friends made it onto the scene, that's when the movie fell apart a little bit for me. But still, I was curious to know whether or not this item was getting stolen or not in this particular episode, and thankfully it did. It wasn't something that was going to be left for a future episode, though, to be fair, given just how little time we ultimately have left in this season, I don't think it would have been wise to kick the can down the road and not do it till next week. And it was stolen by presumably Degasu in disguise. Look, it isn't clear, but given that the preview for the next episode and the title of the next episode seems to hint to something of a heel turn for him, even though, to be honest, he was always kind of a heel beforehand, it feels like it's most likely going to be him. Because, you know, there was never this moment where he said towards the end of the episode, "Oh, Lord Goma, I have managed to secure the third eye." There was nothing like that. He just didn't mention it, even though Goma pretty much said to him, "Bring me that back or he'd never come back at all." So, yeah, this might be the moment where he makes his big power play. I don't fully know, but I'm sure that we'll definitely see next week. Though, to be fair, it might also be Aransu that's behind this. She might have stolen it, used some kind of power to disguise herself, or sent out some kind of as yet unseen lackey to do this. Because this Margin that does this, they look a lot like Glorio, so maybe they and Glorio are like some kind of artificial creation, some kind of artificial margin that they're using for stuff like this. But, you know, we'll soon see. We'll certainly find out next week because, well, we're at that point in the story, so we've kind of got to find this stuff out. And I mean, in fairness, we did get that moment that I have often made reference to in countless videos over the past few years. We finally got it. We finally got the moment where the villain just turned to the camera or just took a moment to just say, "Yes, everything's going according to plan." And I will admit that I love that. I mean, it's cheesy as hell, it's goofy as hell to a certain regard, but, you know, I'm perfectly fine with that. I just, if nothing else, I love the fact that we actually had this moment. We actually had the moment of the everything's going according to plan. It's cheesy as hell. It's a hell of a trope. But hell, we're into the final 5 episodes. We're going to find out who our big bad ultimately ends up being one way or another before too long. So just to have that was perfectly fine. I'm fine with a lot of this. Now, it goes without saying that I did enjoy the action this week. Well, I praise the action in this show pretty much every week, and this week was no exception. To a certain regard, it does harken back to the Red Ribbon Army saga and back in Dragon Ball, which apparently not many people like, but hey, who am I to judge? Now, I did enjoy the fact we do see our characters having to deal with a different type of foe this week. That foe being an organised army. They're having to fight people with guns and tanks and all that malarkey, and I enjoyed it for what it was, though there is this, like, weird tonal thing where there's a part of me in the back of my mind that's just imagining someone that really hates this show watching that sequence of events and just going, "Ugh, well, if this was normal Goku, he'd just charge up and everyone would start running and everyone would start getting knocked all over the place." Which I understand, but there's also a part of me that can't help but agree with that. Like, had this just been standard Goku, he pretty much just charged up, even if it was just Goku around this point in the timeline, and everyone would pretty much have just run away crying and hoping to see their mother sometime soon. Like, so to just have them go through this Black Hawk down, our heroes are trapped under enemy fire, feels a little bit weird, but I do like it because it's given us something that we've not really seen with these characters at any point within this series, where our cast are having to think a little bit more outside the box as to how they deal with threats like this. This is not a series of events where they can just start blasting left, right and centre and hope that it works because of the just sheer amount of damage that's coming their way, and as Neva points out to Piccolo, they got a good shot on you, you're dead. It really doesn't matter about the key stuff, which is something that is illustrated in the Resurrection F stuff, where Goku gets got out from behind from the shadows. I almost made a very topical, if very career-ending joke there, but you get the idea. He was zapped by the guy with the ring, and that could easily have happened to one of our cast members this week. As a little bit more parallel to things, I think it works very well, and I do like this series of events, like I say. And one of the things I really do have to praise here is the fact that, let's be brutally honest, this episode is effectively just one long action sequence. Yes, it's broken up here and there by the backstory stuff for the third eye. Yes, there's different aspects at play here which you spread it out, but the majority of this episode is just one long action sequence of our heroes going from the place that they crashed down to presumably just before where the palace or whatever it is. So to go through all of this and to do it in such a well-constructed, well-presented way without it feeling as though anything's rushing too far or anything's taking too long, I really do like. And even the moment where Panzy's dad and their crew came in, I really did like that. Mostly due to the fact that there's a moment where they're coming in and we've got all the triumphant music. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, they're coming in to save the day. The cavalry's here. They're throwing grenades at people and blowing things up. And then, boom! They get blown out the sky. And there was a part of me that was thinking, oh, they've just killed them. Oh, well, no, hang on. This is anime. No one gets killed by getting shot by things. Certainly not in Dragon Ball, so they can't be dead. But on the other hand, we're towards the end of the series, so maybe they are dead and they'll use the Dragon Balls to revive them rather than turn themselves back into adults or something. I really don't know what we said. Oh, they're alive. I mean, I've got no issue with the fact that they're alive. I just found it so hilarious, possibly unintentional, that you have the happy celebrating music that Panzy's dad and their crew is coming through and they're blasting things up, then immediately they get blown up. But they're okay, and then they have this, neat little action sequence where they all do their thing, they all start fighting amongst them, well, not amongst themselves, but fighting the gendarmerie, and we've got the bit where Panzy and her father, Panzy's on his shoulder and just shooting away at things. I like that. I like how it's all put together. I like how it's paced and presented. I like the sequence where all the little Panzy's dad's goons are just doing their thing and showing off their power, and it almost makes it feel as though those are the guys that are going to fight the gendarmerie force people. There's don't worry, Goku, we'll take care of these jokers. And then they'll just have their big moment of their fight, and then Goku and the others can deal with whomever it ends up being who's going to be the big bad. Because, as I've said previously, I don't buy the Majin Buu being the big bads in all of this. I think it's probably going to end up being Degasu or Aransu, or possibly as an outside bet, Glorio or Neva. I think Neva at this point is the most outside of pets. And I will just say, I do like in this episode, Neva just pretty much said to the cast and to the audience, yeah, they're on their own. I'm not helping with this. I'm not being their Deus Ex Machina here. They've got to do the crap on their own. But anyway, let's get into the negatives. And I don't really have any major negatives with this episode itself. If I am to start getting into nitpicky stuff with this particular one, well, if I am to get into nitpicks, there's two that stick out to me. One is the whole bait and switch of thinking that Panzy's dad and the others are dead, and just what a short gap of uncertainty there was there. I mean, at the very least, that could have been the thing that happens before the ad break, before, oh, they're back and they're okay, and that could have been one way in doing it. The other issue that I have is the circumstances in which Hybis gave up the third eye. Now, of course, it was going to be always going to be wacky and silly how he ended up giving it out. I have no issue with the fact it's done as a gag. I just have issue with the fact that it isn't clear who exactly stole it. I mean, again, maybe it is Degasu using some kind of magic or ability to be the one that stole it. Maybe Aransu is some way involved in all this. I don't think it was her personally that stole it, by the sheer fact that she's in her office doing her everything's going according to plan moment. So I don't think it was her especially. But at the same time, it might be. There is a part of me that, I don't know, the idea that maybe Glorio is an artificial margin. And that other margin girl that stole this might also be an artificial margin. I don't know, that sticks out to me. But it might stick out to me because Glorio kind of looks like the henchman guy from Dragon Ball Xenoverse. And I don't know if they make such a heavy reference to that or not. I mean, maybe if they really want to bring all this together, maybe they'll do that, because that also leaks into the Dragon Ball Heroes stuff. I really don't know. And it's the fact I don't know that is so strange, because it feels such an odd thing to keep who stole the third eye such a mystery, which makes me think that there has to be a twist here. There has to be a twist here as to who actually has possession of it. Like, it can't just be a case of Degasu is now the villain after doing nothing for the better part of 15 weeks. It can't just be him. And the fact that Aaron Sue's doing the whole everything going so good, she has to be in it as well, but I don't know, it feels like there's a scene missing here. Maybe we'll find out a little bit more of it next week. I hope that we'll do, or get some kind of explanation. Well, that's said and done, however, let's get into the overview, and I will just say that I really did enjoy this week's episode. I know that it might not feel I have much to say about it, but to be honest, like I said earlier, the majority of this episode is just one long action sequence with one really great little lore dump moment, and well, it isn't a lore dump, but you get the idea. I really did enjoy this episode. It did everything that it needed to. I mean, it isn't quite the... we aren't quite into final battle territory just yet, but I feel that we are getting into that moment very quickly. I mean, we kind of have to, otherwise it would end up meaning a big final confrontation with Degasu, Aransu, or whomever miscellaneous villain that we've not seen yet would ultimately end up being rather short. I mean, could you imagine if after all of this the big final battle is nothing more than something that just takes an episode to do? I mean, that would be one hell of a disappointment, but hey, we'll soon see about that. But between then and now, however, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner. This week we got Big X1 once again, who says, this week was better than the last week, but I agree we need to see things get serious now. And thank you for your comment, Big X1, and it does feel as though we're kind of there now. Certainly given the tonal shift over the course of this episode, it does feel as though we are actually getting into the meat and the big action stuff that I'm sure that certain audiences will appreciate more than others. But, let me know what you thought about this one down below, my dear listeners. Let me know whether you loved it or hated it. Let me know if you... Well, I mean, it's kind of a bit self-evident, but if you knew that the third eye was in Hybis' possession, let me know in the comment section down below. I mean, I'm sure that you knew, and if you didn't, well, now you know. Anyway, thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!